everybody. Thank you for turning up on the last day. So, last day of the community meeting, how many people woke up today and thought, this is fantastic, I'm going to be coming along and hearing about another standard? A few of you. Okay, great. That's great. For all of the nerds in the audience, we can meet up afterwards and we can talk standards. That's good. For everybody else, I get it. Standards aren't that interesting. They're not necessarily a lot of fun. You're probably like this guy going, oh, God, it's another standard. So I'm not going to talk to you about standards today. I'm going to talk to you about the evolution of payments. I'm going to talk to you about modularity. I'm going to talk to you about flexibility. And I'm going to talk to you about the changes that we're implementing in our new mobile payments on COTS standard. And for those of you who are in payments, and I'm guessing all of you are in payments, otherwise, like this guy, you're probably regretting your life choices right now. For those of you who are in payments, I'm going to set you a challenge and a question. What do you want? What do your customers want, and the customers of your customers? How have things changed in the way payments are accepted over the last 10 years, and what does that mean for you? While you're thinking of that, before I start talking about our new standard, I know I said I wouldn't talk about standards, I kind of lied a little bit. We will be a little bit, just a little bit. I've got to start with some definitions. So what is mobile payments? Because mobile payments means different things to different people. You might say mobile payments and think, okay, mobile issuance. Taking a card, having that card stored on your mobile device and using that mobile device to make payments. You might say mobile payments and think about mobile banking. Having a banking app on your phone and using that to manage your accounts and transfer money and so forth. Within the council, when we talk about mobile payments, we're talking about mobile payment acceptance. Using a mobile device, like a mobile phone or a tablet, using that to accept payment instruments, to perform the payment itself. Now, the concept of mobile payments has evolved over time, and it's been around for quite a long time. In fact, as a little aside, the first thing I did when I left university a long, long time ago, 1994, I'm going to age myself here, was actually building a mobile payment device that integrated a CDMA modem, could be used in a mobile context. And it kind of looked like this thing on the screen right now. You know, it was your traditional kind of pin pad, but it had a mobile integrated modem into it. And we've had things that talked about this, and we've got standards for that, which is our PCI PTS POI standard that allows for mobile-based transaction devices. Now, this has evolved over time to where you've said, okay, well, what if I can take that device, that mobile PTS device, and maybe shrink it down a little bit, get rid of the modem because they're expensive, they're hard to manage and everything, and pair it with a mobile phone, and use the mobile phone to perform the transaction. That's certainly possible. And in that context, you have a mobile payment device. And same sort of PTS thing, it just doesn't integrate the modem anymore, using the phone as a modem. And phones, you know, old phones, big bezels and so forth. We had a standard and for that PTS, and we've had guidance around how to do that since 2014. But things have changed. So in 2018, we introduced more standards that allowed for the use of pins on mobile devices, where you had that PTS device shrunk down again. Now, you remove the modem, you're now removing a lot of the other functions, including the pin entry, having a card reader that you can use to accept the card transaction, but the pin is entered on the mobile phone. But we heard from the market, okay, what if we can use the card on the NFC of the phone? And so we introduced another standard, this is 2019, where you had the ability to tap the card using the NFC interface on the mobile phone, use that for performing mobile transactions. But here you couldn't enter the PIN. And once again, we've heard from the market, well, what if we can combine these two things, have the card and the PIN entered onto the one mobile device? And that brings us to MPOC. So over time, we've had these different standards introduced, these different ways of performing mobile transactions. I think if we can agree on two things, One of them is phone bezels. They're too small now. You can't really hold the phone anymore. They used to be quite big and you didn't kind of touch it. Maybe I've just got big fingers. The second thing is people want flexibility. I asked that question, what do you want? What do your customers want? And flexibility is what we hear a lot of. People want to be able to transact the way they need to for their business. And MPOC is designed to allow for that in different ways. It introduces the concepts of having both the card and the PIN on the same device. So you can do different things with MPOC. You can have a solution where you have your traditional card reader externally and you enter your PIN on your mobile device. You can definitely do that. You can have a solution where you're entering your card on the mobile phone and the PIN on the mobile phone as well. You can do that with MPOC as well. It allows for that flexibility. Just move forward here. So previously, we've had solutions like CPOC and SPOC, which were whole solution standards. You certified the whole thing, including the attestation and monitoring environment, the payment systems environment, the mobile applications, and so forth. What we're trying to do with MPOC is introduce modularity as well, so that it is no longer necessarily a whole solution standard. You can still do that, but we've now introduced the concept, or will be introducing when MPOC comes out, the concept of different listed products. They include the MPOC software, the MPOC software being the product that integrates the SDK, the software that runs on the mobile device that accepts payments, as well as the back-end software that performs the attestation and monitoring environment and the functions around that. We have the attestation and monitoring service that operates that software in the back end, the attestation and monitoring software. So there's separation between the development side and the operational side. And we have the overall MPOC solution, which integrates the applications and so forth that integrate the SDK and operate the whole solution. And so I mentioned that there is that separation between the technical aspects and the operational aspects. And within the MPOC standard, when it comes out, we have 5 different domains. Domain 1 addresses the requirements for the MPOC software, that SDK that sits on the COTS device, on the mobile device, as well as the attestation and monitoring software in the back end. Domain 2 is for how the application integrates that SDK and is able to operate and perform payment transactions. There are different ways that can happen that I'll get to later on. Domain 3 talks about the attestation and monitoring service. So the operation of that attestation and monitoring software that is produced in Domain 1, how that is run, how it's operated, how it's managed, and so forth. Domain 4 is the software management in general. And it doesn't necessarily apply to one entity, because you might have an entity that's producing the software that needs to do key management. You might have an entity that's doing the attestation and monitoring environment, the service that needs to do key management. You might have aspects of the MPOC solution that needs to do key management. And so Domain 4 applies to the general areas that might cover different entities. And then finally, you have Domain 5, which is the MPOC solution, which incorporates the payment decryption environment, the PIN processing environment, the management of merchants, and so forth, and includes the applications that are installed and used and utilize those SDKs. From a website listing point of view, there will be 3 listed products, can be. You can still approach MPOC from the point of view of having a whole solution. And that's fine. MPOC solution doesn't integrate any other MPOC products. That's no problem. However, you can also have that MPOC software product that is separately assessed and listed on our website. You can have an attestation and monitoring environment and service that is separately evaluated and listed on our website. And then you can have an MPOC solution that integrates all of that into one One solution operates it and includes the applications. That's where that kind of lighter pink comes from. So I asked you a question earlier on about what your customers want and so forth. I'm going to ask you another question now. How do you think we develop our standards? Do you picture something like this? A bunch of very serious people in a room and there's someone stabbing a pen on a table in a very serious way saying, we really need this in our standard. It's not entirely wrong, to be honest with you. That does happen. Sometimes tables are damaged, I have to tell you. Not here. If there's anybody from the conference center here, tables not here. Sometimes tables are damaged in the development of our standards. However, that's not the whole process for the development of our standards. We also need your input, and we seek your input through our RFC processes. We've run 2 RFCs for MPOC, and each one of those RFCs has produced fantastic content that has enabled us to improve the standard as it was before the first RFC to where it is now, where we're getting ready to release this standard towards the end of the year. We've had almost 1,000, about 900 to 1,000 comments throughout those 2 RFCs. Brilliant, brilliant content. So what does that look like? It looks like this. This is a diff, if you like, a compare between the document as it stood before RFC 1 to the document as it stood going into RFC 2. Everywhere where you see a bit of red on these pages, that red is a change that was made based on your comments, on the comments we received through the RFC processes from our stakeholder community. So I'd like to thank you personally for all of those comments because they were incredibly valuable in making the standard better. It wasn't a bad standard when it came out in RFC 1. I hope not. I kind of wrote it. However, it's a much better standard now, and that improvement has come from the input that we've had from you. Now, in terms of the changes that were made, one of the major changes that we made from RFC 1 to what we have as a release candidate right now is the way we approach applications. We have different application types. We heard very clearly from the feedback in the RFCs that the way we were approaching applications wasn't flexible enough. It wasn't modular enough. It didn't provide your customers with what they needed. So we made those changes. And we now have 3 ways in which you can produce an MPOC application. You can do it the same way that you do in SPOC and CPOC. You can build the application as what we call a monolithic application from the ground up, no problem, doesn't integrate an SDK. You can build an application using an SDK, and there are 2 different SDK types. One of those is a non-isolated SDK. What we mean by that, it's an SDK that is not able to completely isolate its memory space and the assets that it processes. And so in that context, because an application integrates it, that application has to go through additional testing to be validated to make sure it's still protecting those assets which are not completely protected by the SDK that it's integrating. But we have an SDK type called an isolated SDK. And here is where the SDK is protecting the payment assets that it receives, the card data, the cryptographic keys, and so on and so forth, so that the application, even if the application is compromised, it doesn't matter because the SDK is protecting the data that it's processing. And so there are very much fewer requirements for that type of application. And the context being that we really want MPOC to be a standard that you can use to develop solutions for 10 merchants or 10 million merchants, something that provides the flexibility and the modularity so that you can approach different solutions and maybe with one solution have multiple applications, some for a very niche target and some for a very mass market target. That's what we're trying to do. You can also have these applications interface through with exposed APIs to other applications within the COTS environment. So you can have what we're calling a calling application, any application. Could be a web browser, whatever it is that sits on your COTS device that can interface through to APIs that are exposed by one of these types of MPOC applications, and it says, do a payment. Provides an amount. It's not receiving the card data itself, the calling application, it's just initiating a payment. And in this context, the MPOC application is acting like a cash register, if you like, or like an external PIN pad or something along those lines. You send it saying, do payment. It processes that payment in a secure way based on the way the application is developed, based on the way the SDK works. It then returns payment done. And that way you can integrate different types of implementations, different types of solutions. We also have the ability to support in MPOC multiple SDKs within a single application, up to 2. We leave it at 2 at the moment. So that you might have, for example, an SDK that interfaces through to the COTS contactless NFC, and you might have an SDK that provides for connections to an external card reader. You could integrate both of those into a single application and therefore support different payment acceptance methods within the one solution. So where does that leave us? At the moment, we're getting very close to the release of MPOC. We have it scheduled to be released Q4 of this year, kind of middle of Q4. I'd love to give you an exact date, but I know that if I do, that will entirely mean that that date will be missed. So Q4. We expect the program guide to come out around about the same time. We will also be working on the portal interface and guidance around how to migrate and so forth from different standards. That might be coming out a little bit later, Q1, Q2 of next year. So at the start of this presentation, I gave you a challenge. I gave you a question. What do you want? What do your customers want from payments? I think everybody's going to have a unique answer to that because everybody's got a unique business. Everybody has unique customers. And so my answer to that, as I said, is modularity, flexibility, the ability to create solutions that support 10 merchants or 10 million merchants. That's what we're hoping to facilitate with MPOC. That's what I hope you do with MPOC. Because at the end of the day, it's our job to create the standard. But we don't do anything to implement that standard. That's your job. So towards the end of this year, Q4, when MPOC comes out, it's up to you to make the determinations about how you use this standard, what you're going to do with it. I hope you do something interesting with it. Thank you.